Welcome to The Fix,
the new way to get your copy reviewed by two former copy chiefs.
because whether you're an aspiring copywriter or you've been in the industry for decades,
The best way to improve your work isn't to read books, blog posts, or online guides.
it's to see real writing, your writing, being reviewed and improved in front of your eyes.
And that's the goal of The Fix, to bring you inside a virtual writer's room
And watch along as we review, edit and rewrite real copy.
from real writers like you. So let's get straight into this week's episode. And remember, if you like what you see here,
Please share The Fix with anyone you think would find it valuable. It is completely free. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Fix. Today we're going to take on a bit of a copy challenge that's been sent in by a reader. So it's not a specific piece of copy, it's a request for how we would go about approaching something. So I'm going to bring the letter we've been sent in up on the screen, and I'll run you through it now and you'll see what we're going to look at. So I edited it down, by the way, but I did leave in some of the stuff that's nice about us because I'm an egotist. I love what you're doing with The Fix. Thank you. May I submit a topic request?
no. Should have been the immediate response.
Just praise, please. Direct response for fundraising. I was a fundraising writer for 7+ years, and then I've cut out the name of the institution, but we're talking about a massive, globally known art museum. Mostly writing solicitation letters for various appeals, supporting acquisitions, operating expenses, exhibitions, conservation, public programs. I can tell you we didn't use any of the direct response techniques I'm learning from you and Glenn's book. I've just gone freelance and I'm thinking of pitching former employers to experiment with incorporating direct response techniques into their fundraising, but I still have so much to learn. Some questions. Are there different tactics you employ when approaching direct response in fundraising? When the benefit you're selling isn't tangible and arguably more about the emotional reward versus a product or personal transformation? How about when you're fundraising for a cause like the arts or cultural historical preservation? Doesn't carry the same emotional weight, urgency, immediacy as, say, clean water or starving children. What are the elements of a successful direct response fundraising letter, and how are they different from regular direct response letters? Okay, Glenn, there's loads there. I don't know if we'll be able to answer everything.
No.
I will confess I've never written anything for the fundraising space, but I had an absolute blast thinking about this because I think there's so many different ways you could approach something like that. I think I know what you're going to say. I'm going to try and say it before you, which is that the principles of selling are consistent across all formats and all audiences and all markets. I would say that they don't fundamentally change. You're still writing a letter to a person that has emotions and feelings about the world and a sense of self and status and their place in the world. They still respond to stories, and the question of well, what you're selling isn't as tangible. I actually think those are the best things to sell, because it almost opens the world up into the entire emotional world that we could occupy within the reader's headspace, and it allows us to play around with loads of different things. If we're selling something that has a very tangible benefit, it kind of locks us in on the different ways we can appeal to them. I mean, we wouldn't sell toilet paper using direct response, but the more tangible and narrow the benefit of the product, the more narrow, the more our options as copywriters narrow. So I would actually see that as a benefit of all the. So I think there's tons of different ways that you could approach something like this.
Totally. I mean, I was going to say that it's strange how we all just accept the phrase peri-peri chicken now as within mass culture. Like, it's quite no one questions it anymore, but anybody. Anyway.
But I know that for a long time you actually had a blog about that, didn't you?
Peri-peri chicken.
Yeah.
Look
it up, periperichicken.com.
Yeah, peri-peri direct response. No, I was going to say something very similar, but far more eloquently. No, yeah, it's all the same. Of course it is. Like, well, not of course it is, because there are a couple of nuances that will.
And there are variations, of course, but the fundamentals are the same.
I think it's a really good question and issue to raise, because I've thought about this a lot, actually. I have done bits, only bits. Sound like someone off Love Island now, doing bits. I don't mean it in that horrible way. But I have done bits of fundraising copy. But I sit there and I'm aghast at every time I receive some form of attempt to fundraise that uses such, when they do use direct response, it's such old, like 1980s and prior like techniques. And we're talking like envelope copy and stuff like that. Like, it seems that it's just so in the past, and so unaware of what you could do. And I think that's, of course, really interesting question about the people who've already got money, which we'll get to separately. I want to just touch on that. But we're trying to raise money here. Like, we're trying to, like, and you've got the most emotive thing, like, in whether, depending what it is, whether it's a gallery or something like that. But even then, it's probably for the benefit of others that you're trying to raise this money. Yet there's people like selling nonsense and nothing and meaningless products and services, and they're killing it with the copy. And then fundraising, now that might be because of charity and what have you, and pay things. I understand that, but it really does upset me, and I just think it's such a missed opportunity. When people say, like, how do I show I'm a good junior copywriter? I'll tell you what, go and find a charity and on spec do a thing for them, because I'm pretty sure every charity out there would love a piece of really good copy to send out.
Well, let's dig in. So how would you be approaching something like this?
Let's say all the fundamental principles apply. What is the difference? The first thing that jumped out at me with regards to the nuance here is that everything is pretty much the same, but because you are asking for money and you are going into a very sensitive emotional area. So we're going to go into emotions. Of course, that's where you're targeting. You're looking at your audience going, who am I going here? Now, a more cynical copywriter, i.e. me, and someone who's been doing it for a while, my natural gut feeling is to play on the heartstrings, to to almost be kind of dark about it and get, like, I imagine another episode we were talking about, that copywriter who always goes to the top and just says, blah, blah, shocking statement. You can't do that with this. Well, you can try it, but I feel that would be wrong. But you need to probably start in that insensitive place in your working out, and start there and go, right, well, that would have the most impact without doubt, but because of the sensitivity of this issue, not only the subject material I'm talking about, not necessarily a gallery trying to raise money to buy paintings or something. I'm talking about water aid or whatever, the kind of thing. But start in that like crazy, emotional, dark, manipulative place, and then work backwards. But you need to be aware that you are sending out sensitive material about something sensitive, and it's going to be sensitive when it's arrived, and you can't guilt people in to
you shouldn't guilt people into it. It's a poor emotion to sell.
Yeah,
anyway.
and that, I feel like that's where most people, and even most of the copy I see for fundraising stuff and charity work is kind of going guilt, wink, like what we're saying here is guilt, like I'm guilting you into it. I think that's wrong. I don't think that's the most effective way. I might be wrong, and there might be charity copywriters out there going, well, no, we've tried it all, Glenn, whatever, sure. But, and if they are, please write in, and because I'm really interested to know. But I feel like that's the wrong way around. It reminds me of there's a current advert going around, I think it's for BP or someone like that, where it's a load of kids saying, save the future for us, you're ruining our history. I couldn't be more turned off by that advert. It's like the most, like, I'm just absolutely, who the hell do you think you are to tell me, like, it's BP, for God's sake, like, what's going on? But also these kids going, deep down, I don't care. Like, that's not where I am in that thing.
It makes you feel bad. Well, just to touch briefly on that, it makes you feel bad about yourself. And if you push the reader into a defensive mode, you'll harden the position up. So they'll start to think, in that subject, for instance, well, I'm just working hard to put food on the table for my children and my grandchildren, and I drive a truck. It's not my fault. You know, I get your food to the table. You see, like, you can push somebody into the exact wrong space.
And then, so this is where it's the same principles, but it's probably a little bit harder. But so you can't go to that guilt world, but you also can't obliquely, like, obviously, where we say you make the reader the hero, it can't be too much, you're brilliant for doing this. That's also, I think, you'd probably then on the spectrum go to that other end and go, when you donate this, you'll be fantastic. I don't think that would be the strongest way to sell it either. I think what you need to do is identify those, and I think we always talk about knowing where your reader is and everything. And when we do that, that doesn't mean just find out where they are and then don't think about anything else. Think about all around that, like where aren't they? Because then you can eliminate things. So I think when it comes to writing stuff for this stuff, you need to be see, right, okay, well, we don't want to be there on the negative, making you feel guilt. We don't want to be here like you're the hero of the day because you've given a $5 to like Oxfam kind of thing. Which reminds me of like people giving like Christmas cards with a bit of donation, and it's like a kind of almost like a virtue signally kind of thing. It's just dangerous, don't get me wrong.
I think I would try and, do you know the question I'd ask myself with something like this? Because I think really what you're getting at is that you have to write to it's about self-actualization on the reader's part. So you're asking them, what sort of person are you?
Yeah, and I think that's in the middle ground between those two extremes.
It's probably slightly to more the positive side than negative.
Yeah, definitely.
But you probably, actually to broaden that, you're probably asking, what sort of person are you? And the level underneath that is, what sort of person do you want to be?
Yes. So that BP advert with the kids saying, save the world for me, now it's made it into like this chore, and I'm wrong if I don't do it and all this kind of stuff. But if you even just reframe that just a little bit and started making me think about what kind of world I want to leave behind, what kind of world I can leave behind, what kind of stuff, there's just better ways to do it. And there's like, that's where I think it's so fine, but you've got to see that guilt end and then the positive end. Yeah, I think you're right. It's towards the positive side, but it's not. It can't just be guilt or that other way around.
So in this example, this is art. I think I'd be, because I think you're right. You do have to ratchet it up to the emotional level that absolute 10 you can be at, and then you're probably gonna have to rein yourself in because it's going to be too much.
Yes.
So you've got to go there.
Yeah.
So to go there, I'd be thinking, right, somebody who's going to donate to this cause is going to believe that art matters, that culture matters, that these things probably matter more so than almost anything else because they're who we are.
Yep.
They're almost the highest expression of what it is to be a human. Art.
Yep.
To what a civilization can do and can leave behind. I know that is too far, but like this is the space I think you'd want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think that would be. You're not really going too far in the sense of it's not shocking yet.
No, but civilizational level is too high. But you're trying to get into that space, and you're probably thinking. I think my next question would be, who aren't they?
Yep.
So because I do think status is important. Not necessarily always for donations, but specifically for this thing. I think the sort of person that is going to donate to an art museum.
Yep.
It's going to be a relatively narrow group of people. They're going to be a slightly, elite is the wrong word, but it's in that vibe.
I know what you're trying to say.
It's people who think this stuff matters, and you have to appeal to their sense that, do you know what, you're actually in the minority. There's not many people out there with the means or the way of looking at the world to help us out. Most people can't afford it, or they won't do it, or they have other priorities, but we know that these things matter. We know that. What do we have left from the Greeks? What do we have left from the Romans? We have their art. We don't have anything else. Okay, we have aqueducts.
There's a really long road on the way.
You know what I'm saying, though. I'm in copy mode. I'm not necessarily being 100% authentic to the truth, but to the truth that I want the reader to see in the world. That is true. That art and artwork is what you leave behind when everything else is gone. It's what people can still love. It's what you can pass on. And there's a relatively small group of people that can help preserve these things, and you are one of them.
Yeah.
It's almost that thing of, only 1% of people in this city will be receiving this letter. But if I'm right about you, then you're exactly the sort of person I want to be talking to. Now, that's a little bit of a copy cliche, but I think my first draft would be all of that stuff. I'd be trying to get it out out onto the
yeah,
page.
for art specifically, yeah, I think I'd say that's where you kind of are. You're in that, it's not kind of, oh, we won't have any, people, I could imagine there probably being adverts. In fact, I can kind of think of some stuff now, it's kind of vaguely come into my head, but like, there'll be adverts which goes, oh, I don't know, like an empty gallery wall, and going, without you, there wouldn't be, you wouldn't be able to see Guernica kind of thing. And it's like, oh, well, why is it my responsibility to pay for Guernica to be up there kind of thing? That's too far down here. Whereas if it says like, you own this piece of art, like how you can own this, it's like, no, I don't, get real. So that might be the other side. But where you are, it's like, oh no, you're a type of person that understands this. Like I have a Vic Reeves Alan Moir screen print at home. It's in my toilet. It's sooty and sweep on the toilet with jeans and brogues around their ankles having a poo. It brings me immense joy. And just last night when I was going for a wee, I kind of saw it again, because every time I go in the downstairs toilet, there it is. And I thought, God, that like it cost quite a bit of money, that thing. And I thought, but it brings me joy every time I see it. Like I am that person who might be like, yeah, I'd like to be like donate. I'd like to be in that place where I'd do that kind of thing. Speak to me, speak to that feeling, speak to the joy I get from art. Don't like make it my responsibility to make sure everybody's got art. That's guilting me into it. And don't say like, I'm going to own the piece in the gallery. It's like, no, I'm not. But I'm that kind of person. That's the thing. What's it called? The Royal Academy in London. We were here last week and we went to the Francis Bacon exhibition. It's always friends of the Academy. It's like they know it is that kind of friends of it's the society feel. It's all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's to repeat. It's who you are and who you want to be. But then there's an exclusionary factor, which is that not everybody is like you. So you're appealing to their status and their sense of self and their values. But then you're also making them feel special. So I think that's who you're right. So it's a really important one to really dig in, as it always is, but particularly with this, to who you're writing to.
And I think that answers the second part where it said about you're fundraising for a cause like art. So of course that looks well off, and isn't like if it's Oxfam or if it's WaterAid, you kind of inherently know. Yeah, like they need the money. Whereas if a massive gallery is asking for money, like, well, isn't the sacklers have probably been thrown out of the room now, but they probably do need money. But aren't there like people pay for this stuff? Like, isn't that kind of thing? Yes, and that is the thing. But when it comes to if you identify who the reader is, don't worry about that, because if you get the audience right, they're not thinking that.
And also
they understand that stuff works. You're not going to convince someone who thinks a gallery's for elitist, posh people going. They're never going to give you money. Don't worry about it.
And also that, because everybody thinks, but it's Christmas time, you see all the different adverts. I mean, I don't watch too much telly that has adverts on, you're usually streaming. But when you watch telly at Christmas, it's everything, isn't it? You run the gamut of different donational causes, and I see someone think, who would give money to the donkeys when the children need it? Just to be, uncouth about it. But people, I remember saying that to somebody, and they said, I give money to the donkeys because if I don't, no, it was years and years ago. She kept horses, but she saw it the complete opposite way, which was, but everybody says that. So who gives money to that? And even though it's probably wrong to put it on the spectrum of those things, because it's not like life and death cause in the same way. If you don't, who will? There's only a certain number of sort of patrons of the arts out there with the means and the way of looking at the world to actually make a difference. And you have, but that's so powerful, isn't it? Because if you, as a copywriter, can activate that part of the reader that makes them think, that is me. If not me, then who? Yeah. Think about your friends and family. Think about everybody you know. Would anybody else do this? No, I'm hoping that you're that one in a million, people. Yeah. I think you've got to make them feel special. One other thing I think you could do, so that would be where I'd start, get up into that register. I do think, actually, there's two more questions which answer. So, because it was how would you convince the client to do this? So we'll come to that in a second because I wanted to get your take on it. One other thing you could do on a copy level would be involve the reader in a story in some way. And if you could generate some form of urgency for instance, I don't know how these things work, but a piece of art that's going to be lost or could be preserved or may go into private hands. That's another, like, you know, little, it may be lost to the public if we can't, if you can generate urgency that we need this now because this situation is urgent. I think that would be powerful. If you can involve the reader in the story, the sense that this may be a piece of art that was created decades, centuries ago, that it has a story that goes back a long time. There was a moment where it didn't exist and there was a moment when it did, and you know, somebody created it and now you have a chance to help save it, but we need your help now. That if you can bring the reader into that world, I think that's quite powerful. So I would think about the reader in more general terms about how you can activate those parts and that we've been talking about. But then I'd think about any hot button urgent issues that could help you get over the line of don't do it next year because it'll be too late in this particular instance by then. Yeah. So I think those are the 2 points I'd make on copy. I'd love to see a piece of copy.
And I think we've kind of said it, it's implicit in what we're saying, but your first meeting about it, your first discussion, it needs to all be around the story. You need to drill down into stories on this, like specifically for art, but I think probably for all fundraising and charity copy, it's all about stories. A lot of it already does that, but
there's a ton of stories you can tell. The story of the art itself, story of patrons of the past, story of people who found art through the institution for which you're asking for money. So disadvantaged people who never would have had the access to that artwork, for instance, that actually that this is in the public good, the person that never would have had that access that went on to become an artist or create great works of art. So there's a million stories you can tell. I mean, I don't know which the right one would be without seeing them all. I think it would depend on different things, but there's a story. There's so many stories.
Yeah, just keep the story. Like you should have stuff to test. I mean, we're saying all this. We're trying to be what's the difference, but ultimately though it's all just good copy. Like
we're talking about the same things we always talk. So the differences are very slight. I think if we start talking about stories, that's really a thing for if we had a piece of copy to review, we could look at it. But really, we've talked about strategy and audience. So let's talk about it just from a different angle briefly, which is how would you persuade an institution to use to try something like this?
Yeah, so I think this also, the question speaks to direct response specifically and the dirty elements of direct response, like from people mocking coupons or like call to actions and...
Use a coupon on this. That's the other thing. Use a coupon. Use a coupon. That's really going to work.
You free touch David's chest or something, I don't know. But yeah, like, what I would say is all of that stuff, and particularly I imagine it will be call to actions, especially for like galleries, because I imagine it's all very, look at this amazing thing. Like, well, I know I've just literally seen the poster for the bacon exhibition, which I went to last week, and it is just a picture of a bacon painting that they've chosen that looks nice, and it's got some cool colour work for the logo.
That's advertising the exhibition. That's a different form of...
True, but I think all of that, so we're trying to convince a client who's used to doing that form of advertising. If you try to do something...
There's two things I can think of off the top of my head, which are, one, it's very, very cheap comparatively to run direct response copy, because it's one person that's going to write a letter. Two, most organisations have an email list that they do not know how to use. They're sending email that generates no business, no benefit. And so if you can say it is effectively free to send an email and it's really not very expensive to hire me as a writer in the grand scheme of things, I don't know what this individual would be charging, but it's never going to be, the payoff between what you could bring in and what you're going to be paid as a writer is always going to be huge. So those two things, it's going to be fairly cheap and fairly easy.
Another objection I imagine the client would have, again, because they do them posters in an email, and then they'd probably put, you want to help the arts? Click here. Like, no. The other objection will be, I'm not writing 1,500 words, would be too much probably for someone who's used to sending those out. But I think that's going to be your biggest pushback if you're using a direct response piece of copy, i.e. what might look more like a blog post or might look like a piece of content to the client who's used to just sending out mailers with image-based mailers.
But would you not then perhaps look at, there must be somebody else in the market that's using these sorts of techniques within this segment,
Yep.
Try and find
that.
They're doing it. Why don't we try this? Because that often works because it's a social proof thing. Your peers are trying this. Why don't we try something in the same sort of?
Yeah. So use this writer obviously is identified from my book. There's stuff in there that you could use as proof to go to the client and say, look, they do it in this market, in this market, in this not. Why don't we disrupt this market? Kind of thing. So you could use it in that way. I'm trying to think of objections that the client would have, but ultimately I think they're going to be your main ones. Is if you're looking at copy, they're going to be scared when it goes over 7 lines. So you need to be thinking about that and head it off at the pass. You
probably need to write on spec for something like this as well, because I do think, depending on what the client thinks of what response they have to the words direct response, if you're pitching that, then that just might have too much baggage, and they might just think used car salesman, not art. But if you wrote something, 300 words, and you'd really have to hone it. It wouldn't be like something a bit like this. It'd have to be really, because he said, what if we sent this? So you have to take a speculative risk. You don't actually have to name it. You don't have to say it's a direct response. You'd have to say it's digital marketing. That's what, they're all the same thing. Sure. Digital marketing and email marketing are the same as direct response. It's just, there's a huge overlap in the terms of techniques that you would use. So I think I would probably put...
It's how people sell services to you by renaming them.
Yeah, well it is. But like, I think that would probably help, because if you can get into a conversation about a clever piece of work that you've put together and the merits or demerits of that piece of work, you're much closer to persuading them, right? It's a yes or a no. Whereas if they say no before you've even written anything, it'll always frustrate you. So I'd probably work on spec. Yeah. And maybe say, look, there would be more like this. Maybe we would do a campaign. Yeah, and then you could build it around something like, I don't know, if you make a donation, you get to be a patron of the arts or a friend of the museum, and you get to come to an event of some sort. So like, bring the people together.
Yeah, crowdfunding might be a place to investigate as for that proof of how this stuff can actually help get people donating stuff, and if you get a free ticket with whatever and all this kind of stuff. But you've got to make a case for it. We speak about that a lot, and I think I hate the word copywriter. It's so so pissing useless, and it makes our job so hard because people just expect words, and it's like, no, like that's the end of the, like, it's just, that's the bit at the end. It's all of the thinking that comes before, but the more work you do personally put into showing a client how you can change the way they sell. Copywriter is a salesperson, a salesman in print or whatever, Ogilvy or whoever said the thing, but like, that's, do this work, because it will put you so far ahead of everybody else. Yeah. Like,
I think we should wrap things up there, because we could get out of strategy and into a ton of other stuff. I'd love to see a piece of copy like that. We can. By the way, challenges like this are a great way of getting us copy to look at without actually having to send us the individual piece of copy you're writing about. If you're thinking about strategy, or you want to know how you would approach a certain topic, write to us like this, and we'll sort of give you some pointers or some of our thinking on how we would approach that sort of challenge. I'd love to see the piece of copy itself. We can always redact the name of the institution behind it. So thank you very much if you sent us that challenge. Do send more in when you've written something, and we will take a look. Glenn.
But Cleethorpes Gallery does need more money. It's only showing pictures of fish at the moment, and that's
this was from an institution just slightly bigger.
Grimsby Gallery,
yeah, the big brother to Cleethorpes. Right, I think we should wrap things up there, Glenn. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much, everyone at home, and we will see you again. Goodbye.
And there we have it. We hope you got something valuable out of today's episode of The Fix.
Maybe it sparked an idea or two for your next writing project. Maybe it triggered a new headline, opening line, or story to tell your reader.
Maybe it inspired you to scrap what you have and start over. Or maybe it made you want to submit your current work in progress for a little constructive feedback. If that is the case, send your copy to us at feedback@thefixcopywriting.com. Or if you don't want us to review a specific piece of writing, send us a problem you're trying to solve,
or a challenge you want input on, and we'll do our best to help.
And remember, if you like The Fix, please do share it with other writers, business owners, and marketers.